Complex sentences. What's so complex about a complex sentence? Well, here's the definition. A complex sentence consists of a subordinating clause with a subordinating conjunction and an independent clause. Sometimes the subordinating clause is called a dependent clause. So that's a lot of English teacher talk. Let's just look at what you need in a complex sentence, starting with subordinating conjunctions. So we've had coordinating conjunctions. Let's look at some common subordinating conjunctions. There are many to choose from. Unlike coordinating conjunctions where you only have the fanboys, you have many options for subordinating conjunctions. Here are some common ones. Although, while, even though, even if, whereas, though, because, so that, if, unless, after, before, as soon as, since, when, until, as. Again, there are many more than that. There are two formulas for complex sentences. And I'm going to use the subordinating conjunction if, just because it's short. So we can have if subject verb, comma, subject verb. Or as I like to say, if SV, comma, SV. Or I can flip that around. Subject verb, if subject verb. Or SV, if SV. Again, I'm just using if as an example. It's one of the subordinators, but there are many more. So subordinators are great because you can use coordinating conjunctions and you can use subordinating conjunctions in the same way. You can just change things up by also using them. So remember our formulas, if SV, comma SV, or SV if SV. Now for opposition and contrast, just meaning the opposite, you already know the word but, and the subordinating conjunctions that are like the word but are although, while, even though, even if, whereas, and though, just to name a few. So let's look at our simple sentence, or actually our compound sentence. I prefer face-to-face classes, comma, but online can be fun too. I can just substitute the word but with the word although. Although online can be fun too, I prefer face-to-face classes. So that is using the first formula, if subject verb, comma subject verb. But here, if doesn't work. It has to be contrast or opposition. So I use the word although. So you see although, online can be, that's although subject verb. And then after the word to, we have the comma, and then I prefer, that's the other subject verb. We can flip this sentence around and say it this way. I prefer face-to-face classes, although online can be fun too. So that is subject verb, although subject verb. Notice there is no comma if the subordinating conjunction is in the middle of the sentence. Why? Just because of grammar rules. Here's another example for opposition and contrast. Of course, don't forget the formula. If subject verb, comma subject verb, or the other formula, subject verb, if subject verb. Now remember, the coordinating conjunction yet means surprising but. So we can use the words although, while, even though, even if, whereas, or though, most of the time, yet not always. So if I take the sentence, I work 50 miles away from my house, yet I don't have a car, because it's a coordinating conjunction, I need a comma before yet. Look what happens if I substitute the phrase, the subordinating conjunction, even though. I work 50 miles away from my house, even though I don't have a car. It means the same thing, But now, because it's a subordinating conjunction and it's in the middle of the sentence, I don't have a comma. Why? It's just a rule. I can flip that around and say, even though I don't have a car, comma, I work 50 miles away from my house. So those are three ways of saying the same thing. You should be using different ways of saying the same type of sentence in your academic writing. Be careful with the words while and whereas. You can't always use them to show the same thing as but or yet. They're used more for contrasting. I'll talk more about that later. So for cause, with our coordinating conjunctions, we have that strange word for that I don't recommend that you use. So just remember our formulas. If subject verb, comma subject verb, or subject verb if subject verb. So if I said I took a class for I wanted to learn more, I wouldn't really say that. We just don't speak that way anymore. But the word for is like the word because. And if I put it at the beginning of the sentence, because I wanted to learn more, I need a comma. Okay? Because I wanted to learn more, comma, I took a class. Or I can flip it around. I took a class because I wanted to learn more. And all three of those sentences mean the same thing. Notice that in the top sentence with for, there is a comma before for, and in the bottom sentence before because, there is no comma. Why? Just silly rules of American English grammar. And there are other subordinating conjunctions that show effect. If we say, I took a class because I wanted to learn more, I could substitute because and say, I took a class so that I could learn more. And I could flip that around and say, so that I could learn more, I took a class. But really, we don't use so that at the beginning of sentences. We usually put that subordinating conjunction in the middle of your complex sentence. And we don't have any conditional coordinating conjunctions. But if we remember our formula, if subject verb, comma subject verb, or subject verb if subject verb, we see the word if. And this one is the most common subordinating conjunction for a conditional. And you can see that there's some code written in the picture. If you are in computer science and you're planning on learning coding, or you already know some coding, or you're going to take some coding, it's good to know the subordinating conjunctions and coordinating conjunctions, because those are often used in coding. So I'm just going to talk about grammar and English because I know more about that. So using the word if you follow my advice, comma, you will get a good grade in the class. So that's that formula, if subject verb, comma subject verb. And that means on the condition of following my advice. That has to happen first. And then the other half of the sentence will happen. Let's hope, right? And of course, you can flip this around for the second formula and say you will get a good grade in the class if you follow my advice. And there, the subordinating conjunction is in the middle of the sentence, so there's no comma. And again, there are other conditionals. And I'm really hammering into your head the formula for the complex sentences. If subject verb, comma subject verb, or subject verb if subject verb. We can also use unless, but notice this. If I say, if you followed my advice, comma, you will get a good grade in the class. Notice what happens if I use the word unless. Unless you follow my advice, comma, you won't get a good grade in the class. So if is the positive side and unless is the negative side of a condition. So what that means is if you use if you followed my advice, comma, you will get a good grade in the class. Both parts of that sentence are positive. But with unless you follow my advice, comma, the second half, the independent clause, needs to be in the negative. You won't get a good grade in the class. And of course, I can flip that around. You won't get a good grade in the class unless you follow my advice. I think that's good advice, actually. And then we have subordinating conjunctions of time. We have many, many of these, but they also have those same two formulas for complex sentences. If subject verb, comma subject verb, or subject verb, if subject verb. So you've heard many of these before. After, before, as soon as, since, when, until, as. So let's look at some of these in action. Again, don't forget the formulas. If subject verb, comma subject verb, or subject verb, if subject verb. Let's use the subordinating conjunction after. After she takes a walk, comma, she is always calm. So it's after subject verb, comma, subject verb. And of course, you already know you can flip this. She is always calm after she takes a walk. And you should know by now why there's no comma. So we've learned 3 sentence formulas so far. For compound sentences with the coordinating conjunctions, also known as the fanboys, we have subject verb, comma, and subject verb. Just the one formula. For complex sentences that use subordinating conjunctions, we have if subject verb, comma subject verb, and we can also use subject verb, if subject verb. So just like math, grammar has formulas. I don't know if that makes you happy or sad, but I hope this helps you. I think it's easier to view sentences and their punctuation with the formulas. So enjoy as much as you can.